It was a typical, chaotic morning at the White House press room. Reporters filled the seats, the air thick with anticipation as they awaited the arrival of Karoline Leavitt, the fiercely determined White House press secretary. With her poised demeanor and sharp wit, Karoline had become a staple figure at daily press briefings, handling tough questions with a level of grace that only someone of her caliber could manage. But today, something felt different. The cameras were rolling, the microphones were set up, and the usual suspects were ready for another round of political sparring. What the media didn't expect was that today, Karoline would face a challenge that no one could have predicted. A challenge that would pit her against one of Hollywood's most famous figures, Robert De Niro. The evening before, an exclusive report had surfaced, detailing an incendiary statement made by De Niro at a celebrity gala. The actor, known for his outspoken political views, had taken aim at the current administration, calling it everything from corrupt to dangerous. He didn't mince words, even going so far as to directly accuse President Donald Trump of undermining democracy. De Niro had never been shy about his disdain for Trump, but his latest remarks, particularly his use of inflammatory language, had set the stage for an explosive confrontation. The internet was buzzing, and late-night talk shows couldn't stop talking about it. The media had lapped it up, but it was clear this wasn't just a celebrity spat. It was personal. As Karoline walked into the briefing room, the room fell silent for a moment. The usual faces of reporters were replaced with a heightened sense of curiosity. Everyone wanted to know how she would handle the situation. Would she dismiss it? Ignore the elephant in the room? Or would she confront the controversial actor head-on? "Good morning, everyone," Karoline began, her voice steady and confident with no hint of the storm brewing just below the surface. "Let's get right to it." The room erupted in questions, but Karoline was prepared. She took a deep breath, scanning the crowd before her eyes landed on the first reporter who had raised their hand. "Karoline, the media's been buzzing about Robert De Niro's latest comments on President Trump. He called the administration a threat to democracy. What is your response to that?" A small smirk crossed Karoline's face, though her eyes betrayed a deeper level of thought. She wasn't just going to let this slide. De Niro had crossed a line, and it was time for the administration's spokeswoman to defend the president. "Well," she began, her tone measured but sharp, "it's not surprising that Robert De Niro, someone who's made a career out of playing fictional characters, continues to spout off with exaggerated and baseless claims. But I would ask you and anyone else in Hollywood to consider this while you're out there in your bubble of fame, privileged by your wealth and your platform. The rest of America is working hard, trying to make ends meet, living with the results of policies that have improved their lives." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Karoline was known for her direct approach, but this was different. She wasn't just deflecting a question, she was making a statement. And the reporters in the room could feel it. One reporter, eager to get more out of her, jumped in. "But Karoline, isn't it true that De Niro's comments reflect a broader sense of frustration from people in the entertainment industry who feel like the administration's actions are undermining democracy? Shouldn't we be listening to their concerns?" Karoline's eyes locked on the reporter, and in an instant, her expression shifted. She wasn't just defending the president anymore, she was calling out the hypocrisy that she saw running rampant through Hollywood. "The concerns of Hollywood elites are hardly the same as the concerns of ordinary Americans," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "The American people voted for President Trump because they wanted change. They wanted someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo. While De Niro and his celebrity friends can afford to live in their ivory towers, the rest of us are focused on rebuilding the economy, securing our borders, and putting America first. If that's something they can't understand, then I suggest they stick to acting and leave the real work to those who actually care about this country." The room was stunned into silence for a moment, but then the reporters began to shout, their voices rising in a cacophony of questions. Karoline stood tall, not backing down. She was in control, and the entire press room knew it. But what happened next would set the stage for one of the most memorable moments in White House press history. A reporter from one of the major networks leaned forward, a smirk on his face. "Karoline, we all know that De Niro's comments weren't just aimed at the president. He's also been quite critical of you personally. Any thoughts on that?" Karoline didn't flinch. She stood up straight and looked right into the reporter's eyes. "I have no issue with Robert De Niro's personal attacks on me. I'm used to it. What I do have an issue with is the idea that Hollywood's elite are somehow the moral compass of the country. If Robert De Niro wants to continue lecturing us, then perhaps he should take a long look at his own actions." There's nothing noble about someone who hides behind a microphone to criticize the president while the rest of the world watches. The reporters fell silent once again. Karoline's words hung in the air, and for a moment it felt like the room was holding its breath. The press conference continued, but the tone had changed. The focus had shifted from questions about policy to the very real confrontation between the White House and Hollywood. Karoline Leavitt had thrown down the gauntlet, and Robert De Niro's name would be on the lips of every reporter for the foreseeable future. The White House press conference that day became the talk of the town. Within hours, news outlets across the country were buzzing with headlines like Karoline Leavitt versus Robert De Niro, the White House press secretary's explosive response, and Hollywood versus Washington, Karoline Leavitt's stand against Robert De Niro. The story was everywhere. Late-night comedians joked about it, social media was flooded with reactions, and even De Niro himself responded on Twitter, calling Karoline's comments misguided and laughable. But Karoline wasn't backing down. She had made her point, and now the administration was rallying behind her. The president himself had tweeted his support, calling her a fighter who was not afraid to stand up for what was right. His tweet was quickly shared by millions of Americans, many of whom appreciated the way Karoline had stood her ground. Despite the support from her colleagues and the president, the media continued to hammer away. They questioned whether Karoline's response was too aggressive, whether she had crossed a line by engaging with a celebrity. Some pundits even speculated that her comments might backfire, damaging the administration's public image. But Karoline was unfazed. She knew what she was doing. That evening, she was invited to appear on a prominent political talk show. The host, a well-known liberal commentator, had made his disdain for the administration clear, and he wasted no time in bringing up the De Niro confrontation. "Karoline," the host began with a sly smile, "you've certainly stirred the pot today with your comments about Robert De Niro. Some would say you've gone too far by attacking a Hollywood legend. Do you regret what you said?" Karoline sat up straighter, her posture as sharp as ever. She smiled back, but it wasn't a smile of apology, it was the kind of smile that said she was ready for whatever came next. "Let me tell you something," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Robert De Niro is entitled to his opinion, just as I am entitled to mine. But when he uses his platform to attack the President of the United States, and by extension, the millions of people who voted for him, I think it's time someone stood up and called him out. De Niro doesn't speak for America. He speaks for Hollywood. And there's a difference." The host raised his eyebrows, clearly impressed by her confidence. "So you're saying you don't think De Niro's criticism of the administration is valid?" Karoline didn't hesitate. "What I'm saying is this, De Niro is an actor. His job is to entertain, not to dictate political policy. When he attacks the president, he's not offering constructive criticism, he's just throwing out insults. That's not helpful. And frankly, it's beneath him." The host pressed on. "But don't you think that celebrities have a responsibility to speak out when they feel that the country is heading in the wrong direction?" Karoline paused for a moment, considering her response. Celebrities have the right to speak out just like anyone else. But they also have a responsibility to understand the impact of their words. When De Niro makes sweeping accusations about the administration, he's not just criticizing a politician. He's insulting the people who elected that politician. And that's where I draw the line. The host seemed momentarily taken aback, but he quickly recovered. "But Karoline, many people in this country feel that the current administration is a threat to democracy. Isn't it important to listen to those voices, especially when they come from people who are concerned about the direction the country is headed?" "Of course we need to listen to the voices of the American people," Karoline replied. "But what I'm not willing to do is accept the idea that Hollywood elites like De Niro speak for the average American. The people who voted for President Trump aren't worried about what Robert De Niro thinks. They're focused on jobs, security, and ensuring that their families are taken care of. The rest of the country isn't sitting around analyzing political speeches from actors. They're living real lives with real concerns." The host looked as if he was preparing to dig into her response, but Karoline cut him off before he could continue. "I'll tell you what," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "Robert De Niro wants to throw punches at the president. He wants to get into the political arena? Fine. But don't expect me to just sit back and let it slide. I'm here to represent the people who don't have a voice in Hollywood. The ones who don't have the luxury of living in a bubble of fame and fortune. I'm here for them." By the time the interview ended, Karoline had made her point crystal clear. She wasn't just a spokesperson for the White House. She was a voice for those who felt voiceless, those who were often drowned out by the elite culture of Hollywood and the media. The press conference was one thing, but this appearance on national television was a declaration. Karoline Leavitt wasn't afraid to stand up to anyone, even Robert De Niro. The host looked as if he was preparing to dig into her response, but Karoline cut him off before he could continue. "I'll tell you what," she said, her voice gaining momentum. "Robert De Niro wants to throw punches at the president. He wants to get into the political arena? Fine. But don't expect me to just sit back and let it slide. I'm here to represent the people who don't have a voice in Hollywood. The ones who don't have the luxury of living in a bubble of fame and fortune. I'm here for them." By the time the interview ended, Karoline had made her point crystal clear. She wasn't just a spokesperson for the White House. She was a voice for those who felt voiceless, those who were often drowned out by the elite culture of Hollywood and the media. The press conference was one thing, but this appearance on national television was a declaration. Karoline Leavitt wasn't afraid to stand up to anyone, even Robert De Niro. The following day, the fallout from Karoline Leavitt's comments continued to reverberate across both political and entertainment circles. The talk show appearance had added fuel to the fire, and now the public was eager to see how Robert De Niro would respond. Would he double down on his earlier statements? Would he take the high road? Or would this clash with Karoline escalate even further? De Niro, never one to shy away from a challenge, wasted no time in delivering a response. In a surprise move, he appeared on a popular talk show himself, and the host, knowing the controversy surrounding Karoline's words, asked him point-blank about the situation. "Robert," the host began, "it's no secret that you've been quite vocal about your opinions on President Trump and his administration. Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, recently made some very direct comments in response to your statements. She called your critiques misguided and beneath you. What do you have to say about that?" De Niro leaned back in his chair, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Well, I wasn't surprised," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "When you criticize the president, there are always going to be people in the administration who come after you. It's part of the game. But let's be clear here, I'm not talking about the president as a person. I'm talking about the harm his administration has done to the country. And I'm not backing down just because Karoline Leavitt or anyone else thinks I should." The host nodded. "But you've gone beyond just criticizing the president's policies. You've called him a threat to democracy, and you've made some very strong statements about the way he's running this country. Do you think that kind of rhetoric is helpful in a time like this?" De Niro paused for a moment before responding, his tone turning more serious. "Sometimes you have to speak the truth even if it's uncomfortable. And what I see happening right now is dangerous. We're seeing a steady erosion of the values that this country was built on. Democracy, fairness, and justice, these are the things that make America great. And when I see those things being undermined, I feel it's my responsibility to speak out." The host, sensing an opportunity to stoke the flames of this feud, leaned in. "But Karoline's argument is that Hollywood elites like yourself have lost touch with the struggles of everyday Americans. She says that you and others in the entertainment industry live in a bubble and that your opinions aren't reflective of what the country really wants or needs. What do you say to that?" De Niro's face darkened. "I don't live in a bubble," he said, his voice low and intense. "I'm not some detached celebrity who only cares about himself. I care deeply about this country. I've seen firsthand the impact of this administration's policies on regular people. I've seen families suffering, workers losing their jobs, people losing faith in the system. So don't tell me I don't understand what's going on. I'm speaking out because I care, and because I believe in a better future for this country." Karoline Leavitt and her team can say whatever they want, but the truth doesn't change. The host, now feeling the heat of the conversation, nodded and moved to another topic, but it was clear that De Niro wasn't backing down. His words were sharp, emotional, and unapologetic. The public was divided, with many of his fans rallying behind him, while others questioned whether his fiery rhetoric was really the best way to help the country. As De Niro's interview aired, Karoline Leavitt was already preparing her next move. The White House press secretary was known for her sharp intellect and calculated responses, and she wasn't going to let De Niro's words go unanswered. Later that afternoon, Karoline made a surprise appearance on a major conservative news network. The host, aware of the ongoing feud, wasted no time in bringing up De Niro's latest comments. Karoline, the host said, Robert De Niro has fired back after your comments at the press conference. He says he's not going to back down, that his criticisms are rooted in concern for the country. How do you respond to that? Karoline's expression was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. Well, first of all, I don't need to justify myself to Robert De Niro or anyone else in Hollywood. I'm here to represent the American people, not celebrities. But let me be clear, De Niro's attacks aren't about democracy or the future of this country. They're about his personal disdain for President Trump. He's allowed his hatred for the man to cloud his judgment and, frankly, his sense of reality. The host smiled, sensing that Karoline was gearing up for another punch. But don't you think that there are many people who share De Niro's concerns about the direction of the country? Aren't there valid criticisms that should be considered, no matter who voices them? Karoline's eyes narrowed slightly. Look, I get it. People are frustrated. But when you make blanket statements about the administration, calling it a threat to democracy, you're not offering a solution. You're just stoking division. What we need right now is unity. We need to focus on what's working: lower taxes, job creation, securing our borders. Those are the things that matter. Hollywood can have its opinions, but they don't change the fact that the president is working for the American people. The interview ended with Karoline's words ringing in the air, and the news cycle continued to churn with updates about the feud between her and De Niro. The public debate was growing louder, with more people taking sides. But one thing was clear: Karoline Leavitt wasn't going to let a Hollywood icon dictate the conversation. She was ready for whatever came next. As the days passed, the war of words between Karoline Leavitt and Robert De Niro escalated. The media, ever hungry for drama, kept the fire burning, and the nation seemed divided over who was right in the confrontation. Some supported Karoline, seeing her as a voice of reason and common sense in a world full of celebrity entitlement, while others rallied behind De Niro, believing that celebrities had a right, and perhaps even a duty, to speak out when they saw injustice. The tension was palpable, but it wasn't just about the press conference anymore. What had started as a public spat had turned into a battle for the hearts and minds of the American public. Karoline had become a symbol of the administration's defiance against the Hollywood elite, and De Niro had become the face of those who were not willing to sit idly by as they watched what they believed to be the erosion of American values under President Trump's leadership. The White House, seeing how much traction this story was getting, knew they had an opportunity. Karoline had become a hero to many, and they wanted to keep that momentum going. She was scheduled to appear on a major news program again, this time to speak directly to the American people about her stance and how she felt about De Niro's continued attacks. The news program was set up for a highly anticipated interview, and the host, known for his aggressive questioning style, was ready to dive in. As soon as Karoline took her seat, the host wasted no time. Karoline, you've become something of a lightning rod for this confrontation with Robert De Niro. The country is watching, and it's clear that you're not backing down. But do you think that your comments have gone too far? Some are calling it a personal attack on De Niro rather than a political argument. Karoline's face remained composed, but there was a glint in her eye that made it clear she was prepared for this moment. First of all, I'm not attacking Robert De Niro personally. I'm challenging his rhetoric and his role in this cultural battle. He's entitled to his opinion, just as I am entitled to mine. But when someone uses their platform to attack the President of the United States, they're attacking the millions of people who voted for him. And that's not just a political issue, it's personal for those people. The host nodded, trying to keep the discussion grounded in the specifics. But you have to admit, De Niro's criticisms aren't just directed at Trump as an individual, they're about what he represents. And many Americans, particularly those in Hollywood, believe that Trump's policies are harmful to the country. Are you saying that they should remain silent because they disagree with the president? Karoline leaned forward slightly, her voice firm but controlled. No, I'm not saying they should remain silent. Everyone has the right to speak their mind. What I'm saying is that there's a difference between constructive criticism and making inflammatory, divisive comments. De Niro isn't offering solutions. He's offering insults. And it's not helping the conversation. The host, sensing that Karoline was standing her ground, pushed further. But some argue that De Niro is simply trying to sound the alarm about what he sees as a threat to the American way of life. Shouldn't we be open to hearing those concerns, especially when they come from someone with his level of influence? Karoline's expression didn't waver. Sure, we should always be open to hearing concerns. But we also have to be discerning. Just because someone has influence doesn't mean their opinions are always grounded in reality. De Niro is speaking from a place of frustration, but his words are not reflecting the reality of what's happening in America. The American people want solutions, not celebrity rants. The host seemed momentarily taken aback by the force of her response but quickly recovered. So, if you were to speak directly to Robert De Niro right now, what would you say to him? Without missing a beat, Karoline replied, I'd tell him to stop using his celebrity status as a weapon. I'd tell him to stop undermining the people who are trying to make America stronger and safer. And I'd tell him that if he really cares about the future of this country, he should try listening more and yelling less. The host, now clearly impressed by her unwavering stance, nodded slowly. You've made your point, Karoline. But the question remains, can this country find a way to come together despite these divides? Can we find common ground in the midst of all this anger and frustration? Karoline took a deep breath, her expression softening for a moment. That's the real question, isn't it? And I think the answer is yes. We can come together, but only if we stop letting people like Robert De Niro divide us. If we focus on what really matters, job growth, security, a better future for our kids, then we can start to heal. But we have to be willing to listen to each other, even when we disagree. It's about respect. And that's something I think De Niro has forgotten. As the interview wrapped up, Karoline's words left a lasting impression. The media buzzed with the aftermath, and viewers across the country debated whether she was right. Was she the voice of reason in a sea of celebrity-driven chaos, or was she simply an extension of an administration that was out of touch with the concerns of ordinary Americans? The following morning, Robert De Niro, undeterred by Karoline's comments, responded once again, this time with a statement delivered through his publicist. The statement was sharp, a direct rebuttal to Karoline's interview, and it suggested that she was missing the larger point. The day after Karoline Leavitt's interview aired, Robert De Niro's response hit the airwaves like a thunderclap. His publicist issued a scathing statement, accusing Karoline of missing the bigger picture entirely. The statement went viral almost immediately. I understand that Karoline Leavitt, as the press secretary for the president, has a job to do, De Niro's statement began. But there's a big difference between defending the administration and defending the indefensible. I speak out not out of frustration but out of concern for the future of this country. We are in the midst of a crisis, our democracy is under threat, and we are witnessing a regression of our values. Karoline can continue to attack me all she wants, but my conscience is clear. I will continue to speak the truth even if it makes people uncomfortable. The statement sent shockwaves through the media. Some praised De Niro for his unwavering stance, while others criticized him for being too harsh and dismissive of the very people he claimed to defend. But one thing was clear, this feud was not going away anytime soon. In the days that followed, the divide between De Niro and Karoline deepened. Social media exploded with heated debates, with supporters on both sides passionately defending their respective champions. Hashtags like #Team Karoline and #Team De Niro trended on Twitter, and memes flooded Instagram and Facebook. The lines between celebrity culture and politics had never been so stark. Karoline, ever the strategist, knew how to play the game. She was quick to seize the opportunity, taking to her own social media accounts to make a pointed statement. Robert De Niro can say whatever he likes. It's his right to speak out. But let's be clear, when it comes to defending our country, we need more than just actors and activists. We need leaders who understand what's at stake. The president and his team are focused on securing a better future for all Americans, not indulging in celebrity-driven narratives. I stand with the American people, not Hollywood elites. The post went viral in its own right, with thousands of retweets and likes from her supporters. It seemed as if the White House press secretary had solidified her place as a voice of reason, in stark contrast to the Hollywood elite she was battling against. But the story wasn't over yet. The showdown had reached its climax, and now it was time for the ultimate face-off, an actual public debate. A well-known political talk show, which had already hosted both Karoline and De Niro in the past, proposed a live debate between the two. The format would allow each side to present their arguments, answer tough questions, and finally, give the American public a chance to see both figures face-to-face in a live broadcast. Karoline, who had always been known for her sharp wit and poise under pressure, immediately agreed to the debate. De Niro, always willing to fight for what he believed in, didn't hesitate either. The day of the debate arrived, and the nation watched with bated breath. The audience was split. Some were eager to hear Karoline's reasoned, policy-based arguments, others were waiting for De Niro's passionate, impassioned rebuttals. The stakes were high. This wasn't just about a celebrity criticizing a politician, it was about two fundamentally different visions for the future of America. The debate opened with a question about the role of celebrities in politics. The host turned to Karoline first. Karoline, you've been very vocal about celebrities like Robert De Niro using their platforms to attack the president and his administration. But do you think it's possible for someone in the entertainment industry to use their influence for good? Karoline's response was measured but powerful. Of course, celebrities can have an impact just as any other citizen can. But when you're using your platform to divide the country, to attack the president, you're not contributing to the conversation, you're hindering it. Celebrities should be careful about the messages they're sending, especially when they have millions of people listening to them. I believe in constructive criticism, but I don't believe in tearing people down without offering a solution. The host turned to De Niro. Robert, do you feel that your criticism of the administration is, in any way, contributing to division? Is it possible for you to be a part of the solution rather than just a critic? De Niro leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the audience. I don't want to divide the country. What I want is for people to understand the truth. We are facing a crisis of leadership and I can't stay silent while this administration continues to do harm. I'm not trying to tear anyone down. I'm trying to make people see what's happening around them. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. But if we don't face it, we're going to lose everything that makes America great. The debate continued, with each side taking sharp jabs at the other. Karoline emphasized the importance of unity and pragmatic governance, while De Niro doubled down on his belief that the country was heading toward a dangerous future if President Trump remained in office. The audience was on the edge of their seats as the two figures clashed, their words cutting through the air like daggers. As the debate drew to a close, it was clear that neither side had won the argument decisively. The country remained divided, with some believing Karoline had made a strong case for the administration's approach, while others felt that De Niro had laid bare the stakes of the situation. But there was one undeniable outcome of the debate. Both Karoline Leavitt and Robert De Niro had proven that they were willing to fight for their beliefs, no matter the cost. And in that fight, they had earned the respect of many, even if they would never see eye to eye. In the end, it wasn't about who won or lost. It was about the message that each had sent to the American people that in times of crisis, we all have a role to play, and sometimes the most unlikely voices can become the loudest and most powerful. And as the dust settled, the final thought lingered in the minds of those who had watched the showdown unfold: this battle was far from over. The war of words would continue, but it had proven one thing for certain: no one, not even the most famous of Hollywood stars or the most powerful of political figures, was going to back down in this high-stakes fight for the soul of America.